Well, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Christina from myosh, and I cannot tell you how excited we are to have you join us today for the first session of 3 in our Strategy for Safety webinar series, proudly brought to you in collaboration with FEFO Consulting. Now, today's session is titled Ignite Your Safety Identity. Set the vision. And it's all about creating clarity and momentum in your safety journey, knowing where to focus, why it matters, and how to build a vision that truly inspires action. Now, leading today's conversation, we are thrilled to have Mark Wright, founder and director of FEFO Consulting, a respected voice in strategic safety leadership. And Mark is joined by Todd Coates, CEO of the world-famous Bridge Climb Sydney, spanning 2 decades, and now the chair of 4 Vistage peer advisory groups. Both Mark and Todd will be bringing valuable frontline and leadership insights to help bring the big picture into sharp focus. Together, they will explore how to define your safety identity, build that case for change, and mobilise a critical mass of support. Now, as always, we want this session to be as engaging and interactive as possible. So please jump into that chat box, share your thoughts, ask questions, and let us know what's resonating with you. We will do our best to cover as much as we can, and we'll have some time for a Q&A, hopefully at the end. But yeah, just please ensure that you are popping any thoughts you have into that chat box for us. We'll also have some polls throughout to get you engaged and just allowing us to understand where your thoughts and your minds are at. I'm going to stop yapping and hand you over to Mark and Todd.
Great, thank you, Christina. I'm really interested to listen to everyone's experiences in and around strategy today, along with Todd. I can't think of anyone more credentialed to talk about strategy today, particularly as it relates to safety as well. I'm also interested to talk about safety today as well, because strategy today as well, because I think strategy is often a misunderstood term and often neglected in the industry of health and safety. So look forward to having a chat today, which will be the first of 3 sessions. For those that don't know much about FEFO, we're a purpose-driven organisation. We help organisations not only prevent harm, strive for excellence, but also build high performance. And part of that is to have a really effective strategy. So we'll talk about that today. So Todd, I'll let you introduce yourself. So yeah, feel free sharing with the audience a little bit more about your background as well.
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to serve you, Mark, and serve all the practitioners online. Be a great conversation. So I began life in Wright operations with Luna Park back in the 1980s while I was studying at uni. So I was responsible for life safety in those frontline roles right from the beginning. That eventually led to Australia's Wonderland, where I opened that park and was the leader of the rides department, about 200 people there, and eventually did what I call my Masters of Attractions, where they actually had me work in management roles all over the park, including loss prevention manager, as it was called, an American styling, loss prevention manager for 3 years, until I became CEO at Wonderland. And then in 1998, faithfully met Paul Cave, the entrepreneur who had negotiated the Bridge Climb agreement. Paul was the outside guy. I was the inside guy who made the business happen with 1,500 other wonderful people. So I prefer to think that I stood at the centre rather than anywhere else, because it was an amazing thing to be a part of. 20 years with Bridge Climb, just a privilege to serve that. And I hope, Mark, we can bring some of the sharings and lessons we had from those experiences for you today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Todd. Look forward to your insight. So today we'll be talking a little bit about creating a case for change, creating a vision, where to play, and almost more importantly, where not to play, and how to make those strategic choices to ensure you not only have an effective strategy, but hopefully an effective impact and outcome as well. towards the end, we've got an offer and we'll provide a few resources as well. So Christina, before we kick off, be good to hear from the audience. So if you don't mind, are you able to...
Yep, I'm launching this poll now. So you will see this in the chat box. Please feel free to answer the question. My organisation has an effective health and safety strategy. Do you disagree, agree, mostly disagree?
Brilliant. So Christina, I'm hoping you've got some visibility of the results there and you can share that with the audience.
I do, yes. I will just wait a little bit longer for some more people to answer. Okay, so we have 57%, so that's the majority, saying that they mostly agree. 33% are saying mostly disagree, followed by in equal, disagree, and neutral. So I'm going to take a screenshot of that so we can refer to that afterwards as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Christina. So that gives us some, I guess, understanding of where people think their organisation's at the moment, and it'd be great to reflect on that towards the end as well. So as mentioned, this is part of a three-part webinar series. Today we'll be talking around those things that we mentioned at the start, starting with a case for change. It's also worth recognising the following two webinars follow a rhyme and reason around how to both develop and deploy an effective strategy. So Nicole Kidman will be joining us from Journey Beyond, one of our clients we've been working with over the last little while. And also another colleague that we've worked with in the past, Adam Jackson, Webinar 3, who's recently started in a new global strategy role with JLL. So yeah, really look forward to hearing from both of those people as well. So with respect to the webinar series that we are following, we've provided a step-by-step process, if you like, in and around what an effective strategy looks like. That's largely built on a book called Play to Win, and we've adapted some of those concepts to give it a bit of a safety flavour and developed a few little resources and tools too. So if you are interested in some checklists and some free resources, there's a QR code on the screen now, and if you miss out right now, we've got the QR code at the end as well. The idea there is to provide a bit of guidance for organisations on how to go from start to finish on both developing and deploying an effective strategy. So today we'll be talking around steps 0, 1 to 3, 1 to 2, with the starting point around creating that case for change. It was really interesting, actually. There was some LinkedIn correspondence this week around this webinar, and a gentleman had made a query around, should we be starting off with what our objectives are first, or do we measure performance first? It's a bit of a chicken or the egg scenario. I guess my personal view with that is it is situational. Some organisations don't know where to start, or could be even resistance to change. So having a baseline performance assessment can go a long way to helping organisations create a case for change to get moving. And for some organisations, they are pretty clear on where they want to go. So it's a case of really being clear on who the organisation is and where they're going with their vision. So again, very situational. And each of you on the call, I guess, can reflect on where you're at with your organisations too, with what is respectively most beneficial for your organisations. So with that in mind, after really just touching briefly on those steps, we've got a second poll. So Christina, if you wouldn't mind getting up that second poll. Again, it'd be really great to hear from the audience around where they think they're at with respect to having a standard process around a strategy. I think that there is a big difference between having a strategy in place and having a standardized approach to how you go about both developing and deploying an effective health and safety strategy.
Okay, so you'll see that poll live in your on your screens. So just a simple yes or no response. I'll wait for a few more to pop in there. But so far, 61% are saying no. Oh, that's changing now. It's very neck and neck. All right, I'll give it one more second. All right, so 56% are saying no, 44% yes.
All righty. Thank you, Christina. Again, we'll reflect on some of that towards the end of this presentation as well. So first agenda item, creating a case for change. So I might get yourself there, Todd, to chime in here in a second, because I think it is really important to set the scene around differentiating between what a strategy is versus a plan. And we'll talk a little bit more around contextualizing that within your businesses and understanding where potential gaps are before getting started. So over to you, Todd. I'm keen to understand some of your thoughts and stories you've got around this topic.
Thank you, Mark. Ignite your safety culture. What an interesting challenge you put at the start of it there. And I'd actually like to start with, we're going to talk about strategy versus planning, and I hope there's some great insights there for you all. We're going to start a bit lower than that, actually, at cause and meaning. And igniting change, I agree with Mark. You can talk about performance and outputs, but they are results. There's certain validity for doing health checks and assessments, absolutely, to understand where your gap is. But let's just for a moment think about the cause for safety in your business and the meaning that safety has in your business. I put there it's enduring and never ending. And I made the comment, this came very clear to me after just a few years in our industry. Our customers, our guests came into our parks and they put their safety into our hands. We would move them at high Gs in all directions and do various things with them. And they put their lives into our hands. Our teams did as well, working with them and working with each other on those pieces of equipment. It really is a very grounding place to start to understand what is our cause for safety. And for us, that was very, very present, very immediate, and very near. What is that for you and your organizations? That's actual meaning, whether it's psychosocial or life safety. One of the questions I ask our owners, who all have to wrestle with this, I work with about 55 owners and CEOs, is where do they feel the most responsibility? Where do they feel the most responsibility? I'm suggesting, Mark, here that there's something that comes in starting with choices that are much deeper than safety being about compliance or about meeting a legal responsibility. There is something more foundational that can inspire a culture that then leads to all the other things that we can talk about. For us at Bridge Climb, our purpose, the reason we got up in bed in the morning was to make a hero of the bridge and a hero of every customer. Our safety culture started with 3 words that we spoke about to the RMS during our negotiations, which was, nothing shall fall. Nothing. And that, in a way, was a 3-word way to sum up how safety would sit at the heart of our business, along with 3 other words, make it safe. That might be a good place to start, but I'm keen, Mark, where would you like to take that conversation next?
No, I think it's a great intro in terms of the concepts we're going to be talking about in a moment. The first one being identity, and I think you've explained that really well with respect to the Bridge Climb there, Todd. I think if you can get people to really buy into who they are and the purpose they serve, it goes a long way to creating a really strong belief in the high performance culture, or a really strong belief in the strategy that the organisation sets on. As we think about the difference between a strategy and a plan, we'll talk about the identity piece in a moment, I think broadly speaking, and again, Todd, I'm really keen to get your insights in here. Strategy really is about making choices, feeling uncomfortable, and working out how you're going to win, as opposed to a laundry list of actions. I think it's fair to say that, and I'm guilty of this, having worked in organisations myself. You often start with what you think needs to happen. You write a set of objectives and targets, then off you go with the plan and try and execute it your best you can, without stopping and truly reflecting on what the most beneficial choices are within your organisation. Todd, from your perspective, what do you think the real differences are between a strategy and a plan?
We had a saying at the Sydney Harbour Bridge, we stand on the shoulders of the mighty, which is the 1,600 workers who built the bridge in the 1920s. And thinking about this, Mark, I am standing on the shoulders of the mighty here. This idea was brought to life by Roger Martin and A.G. Lafley in their book Playing to Win. And as I mentioned before, I work with about 55 owners and CEOs at any one time. And if you ask them, and you might have experienced this yourself, everyone out there, ask them, what is strategy? It's amazing how long the silence will go. When people go, well, strategy is, well, it's like asking, is the sky blue? But when you're asked to define it, people really struggle with that. So I really like this set of thinking that we brought into Bridge Climb, which is simply this: strategy is choice. You have to make choices in a business, choices in a safety sense, choices every day. Those choices are your strategy. Planning is the execution of those choices. It is the objectives, the activities, the initiatives, the things you do to bring those choices to life. What Martin and Lafley maintained is that those choices should have a winning dimension. You're not just playing to play, you're playing to win. Now, in the context of safety, we're talking about harm minimisation and about people thriving and the company thriving. There has to be some sort of aspiration, back to the points I made before about what's the meaning and the foundational stuff. If you're making choices, you have to be very clear about where you're going to play, what's our playing field, if you like, and where we're not. And in the space of safety, our job is to be the champions of that. That's something we would say at Bridge Climb. You are the champion of safety as the WHS manager, and you have to be very clear about where you play in those. Strategy is always evolving. You are always having to make these choices in the face of uncertainty, and you have to make judgment. This is the critical thinking skill, everyone. When we are making strategy choices, there's always uncertainty about the future, but you have to make judgment about those and make choices and go a certain direction. Over to the planning one, and I love that Mark has scratched out strategic planning there, because I share Lafley and Martin's view that strategic planning is a curse upon us all. It's completely confusing. They are completely different things. Strategy is one thing, planning is another. Planning, if you like, is moving the ball down the field. It's the tactics. It's the tactics to bring your strategy choices to life. The other thing about objectives and planning is the things that you plan to do are within your control. They are things that you can influence, that you can make something happen in. They're specific. I hope that, Mark, adding where you started, gives some way of defining the differences between those, and we can all start thinking about what does that mean in our safety practice.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Thanks, Todd. And I think if there's one message that people might want to take away from the session today, is to have a think about whether you've got a strategy or whether you've got a plan, and what's best for your organisation. Often the plan is supportive of a strategy, but it is also often confused too. The other thing worth recognising too is that, particularly for the health and safety professionals on the call today, is that the ISO standards that are well embedded in many organisations often talk about setting clear objectives and targets and having a plan. So it is easy for many organisations to adapt or adopt the ISO requirements and think that they've got a strategy, but in effect, that's not necessarily the case. So having an effective strategy is really powerful, because if the strategy is not right, it doesn't matter how good the plan is. You could be underutilized or underperforming, or there could be some missed opportunities that you may have had otherwise if you had made the right strategic choices in the first place. So as part of getting kickstarted with any strategy, it's really important to understand the context. I think as a support function, health and safety professionals often get stuck in the world of health and safety and can lose track that they're actually within a business, and the business has got a particular focus, commercial focus, and or in its own business cycle. So it's important to sort of dovetail in whatever you're thinking around health and safety as it relates to some of your strategic choices in the context of where the business is at. The business is at and in terms of its business cycle and all the other opportunities that threats that present within that. We often use this concept of maturity versus performance. Some organisations choose to have a Corolla and work at a really basic compliance level, but it want to perform well at that level. Others want to be world best practice and leading edge, and also want to perform at a certain level. It's okay to have a Corolla and have the Corolla perform well. So you don't necessarily need to be shooting the lights out and over-investing or overshooting the mark on something that's just not going to stick for your organisation. So understanding where you're at in terms of the desired maturity versus performance of where you want to perform is also really important too. Really keen to get your insights on this one, Todd, because as you might appreciate, there can be a health and safety strategy, but it may not be as effective unless it's aligned with other parts of the organisation. And often there are other support functions within your organisation and the business at heart, really, in terms of where the business is going. And they all should be somewhat aligned and working together. And in the context of safety, often I think it's really quick to lose sight of who your customer is. So in the chat, Christine, I would be really keen to understand from people on the line, as Todd talks about safety in the broader context of a business, people on the call, who do you think your customer is as it relates to health and safety? So if you're supporting or leading a health and safety strategy, who is your customer ultimately? So Todd, over to you.
Yeah, wow, that's a really interesting thing to think about. You've got me ticking over very hard here. I think from what I've learned, if company foundations create the alignment first in this area, so our vision, our purpose was to make a hero of the bridge in every customer. Our vision, and if you like, my definition of vision, everyone, is an aspirational, desirable future picture, something that we could all imagine. How could you apply that in your work? It's something you're always chasing. You never get there. In our case, it was to be the ultimate experience of Sydney. Now, at the heart of this, that credibility, the reputation, the ability to make that happen relied completely on what we could achieve in the safety space. Our mission, what we did every day, is my definition of mission, was simply 4 words: every climber, every climb. So start to think about how we've defined the foundations for safety in the organisation, first in our entire purpose, B, in our vision, and then C, integrated into something that we do every day: every climber, every climb, and the team that made that happen. Now, from there, it's how does safety become a part of every single conversation? And I guess with my background, I came to this business as the CEO, understanding that it had to be part of every single conversation. We use the idea, Mark, of champions, that we had of course a health and safety professionals, we had maintenance folk, we had all the folk in operations, but in each of those areas there were people who were designated as champions for our safety values. So we created nooks, if you like, in every part of the business. I think the other thing again is think about how your values and your practices make it compulsory for everyone, no matter their function in the business, to consider safety, both human, psychological, and otherwise first. For us, it was that idea of make it safe. For us, doing the climb wasn't about this is how you do the climb, you must do it this way. Although those of you who've been on bridge climb will remember that very well. Internally, our focus was how can we make it safe for you? So whatever your particular situation was, across our 20 years, we had zero, speaking of outcomes, we had zero serious injuries and zero public liability claims across the 4 million people who went up the bridge with us. Quite an outcome. But if you think about the words make it safe, during that time, we conducted 80,000 medical assessments, and over 99% of those, we enabled them to climb. Whatever type of disability or concern they had, we found a way. Keep in mind that around 70% of the population, according to the best stats we could ever find, have a fear of heights. So in some cases, making people safe was actually just a fundamental part of our operation. As I give you these examples, what does it inspire in you? I'll give you one last story here, Mark. We're sitting here in Sydney, and the three of us were talking beforehand about, what an extraordinary weather event we're going through. I worked with outdoor attractions for 35 years. We were as attuned to the weather as farmers and all other folk are, but in different ways. One of the decisions we made to unite the business was weather is the experience. In my world where I came from, whenever it rained, the business would stop. We made a conscious decision, a strategy choice, a choice at the beginning of the business that the weather would be the experience. Now think about it. If that's a fundamental principle of our business, how does that drive all of us on the search to find ways to make it as safe and as comfortable as we can, no matter what the weather conditions are? I'm interested what that picks up for you, Mark, and where we might take it from there.
Yeah, great, Todd. I really liked your comments there around how safety almost become integrated as part of all of your business choices.
Yes.
Which is, and the stats you referred to there, they're extraordinary. Yeah, truly extraordinary. So something to be proud of there, Todd. And hopefully there's a few lessons for the people on the call there too around how to position safety within your organisation too.
And could I say maybe, and I think that's the job of us as safety professionals to make this immediate and apparent in the business. It is one of the responsibilities we carry. It's great to talk about that zero public liability. And likewise, I know that lost time injuries is not a stat used much anymore, but we had zero LTIF from 2010 to 2018, reflecting parts of the system. But I'll tell you what, guys, just so you understand, and how do you create this in your business? When the Luna Park fire happened in 1979, we lost a child to a drowning at Wonderland in the late 1990s, and then the Dreamworld River Wright tragedy in 2016. That is a fundamental breach of trust. And if you want to talk about commercial success, those sorts of breaches can undo businesses. That's an outcome. But it brings us back to, it just really kept us really focused. And I guess for everyone here, when you're thinking about your strategy, what is the compelling thing that will bring people together in the cause of safety? Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Todd. And having that inspirational vision or identity, we'll talk about in a moment too. And for some organisations, jumping straight to something inspirational may not get the same buy-in if the case for change or even the recognition as the need for change is even there. So understanding the gap between your current state and future state can be really important in the context of where you want to play, which we'll talk about in a moment too. And Todd, from what you were saying there, there's some pretty clear visions for your organisation or where you were at the beginning versus where you wanted to be. And no doubt the strategy that you deployed to get there helped you achieve some of those goals as well. We use a range of different assessment tools, and outside of, I guess, what we use in an organisation, there are lots of different assessment tools in the marketplace to identify what your gaps might be before you get started, to help create a case for change, and also help create a focus of where you need to to focus your resources and attention, and also if you are to make those strategic choices, it's often a trade-off, right? So if you understand where the gaps are, where you are, where you need to be, that'll help inform some of your strategic choices and trade-offs. So in terms of the vision and aspiration, Todd's spoken about this already, which I think is amazing. I'll provide a couple of other examples here as well that I've found through both our experience with organisations and doing a bit of research on the internet, just to sort of bring this to life in terms of some practical examples of how people can use an identity and vision to inspire organisations. Todd, before we do that though, you had a story around some sort of aha moment where that sort of case for change become almost visible and in your face, and created a bit of a starting point of your safety journey as an organisation too.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. It's good to be able to share this. We opened the business. We had this very clear picture of what safety would be and where it would be in the organisation. And when you come to talk about values, Mark, remind me, let's talk about some things to make those values live. The story I wanted to tell, though, was 2 years into our operation, we found ourselves in a situation with spiralling soft tissue injuries amongst our climb leaders, keeping in mind that nobody had ever done anything like this before. And climb leaders were going up the bridge 3 or 4 times a day. And what we actually found in terms of an outcome was our workers' compensation premium had reached, and we're talking the late 1990s here, nearly $500,000. And at that point, we had about 50 people. It grew to 150 in the climb leading department. It wasn't sustainable from a commercial point of view, and it is good. Let's touch on the commercial part. So certainly from the owner's point of view, there was a driver commercially, but we were really wrestling with this. And then let me tell you, it was one of our shareholders was Jack Cowan, who's the founder of Hungry Jack's. And Jack introduced us to a business that came in, and they were self-insurers at Hungry Jack's in those days. And he gave us a consultant who came in and gave us an operating system for workers' compensation. So we had to tackle the problem from 2 sides. One, what happens after the injury? And we gained an operating system. This is the important part of planning and objectives, which enabled us to bring people back to health as quickly as possible. Then on the other side, we created a climb fit program to get the climb leaders all had issues with their calves and lower leg and upper leg soft tissue injuries, mostly because of the activity they were doing, and they had issues with their core. Their cores weren't strong enough. They were working their legs, but their cores weren't supporting them. So we introduced a program called Climb Fit. Again, a system, rituals, cues, ways of doing it, and climb leaders were required to do these exercises. We created a gym at Bridge Climb where they can do them. So it was an aha moment. So I think it's important to share that story, because although we've had those wonderful outcomes from Bridge Climb, thinking about strategy choices, strategy is made in uncertain times. We didn't know we were going to cause these soft tissue injuries, but it was how quickly we could react and then come up with a strategy for that uncertainty and then put a plan in place for it.
Yeah, brilliant, Todd. That's really insightful, particularly as we start to explore the next few slides around what an identity is and how to establish and inspire organisations. I love the book Atomic Habits, and I think as it relates to safety, and even my own personal journey around my own personal habits, I think establishing an identity is really important. Todd, you spoke really passionately about your organisation's purpose and mission. Being really clear on that is a great way to get started. One of the phrases I like from James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, is the more pride you have in a particular aspect of your identity, in terms of who you are and who you want to be, the more motivated you are, and the willingness you will to maintain those habits. So, being really clear on who you are as an organisation, is a really great way to get started. The vision, the values, how you bring that to life, the habits and behaviours that come from that, the strategy, the plan, are all underpinned around who you want to be as a person. Now, one of my 4 or 5 identities I've described me personally is to be a healthier human. So my habits on a daily basis is to meditate and to exercise on a daily basis in some description. So the identity is to be a healthier human. The habits and how I get there, it's forever changing. But yeah, being really clear on that identity can be super powerful. And we'll share a few more examples in a moment of organisations who I think have done it really well. The first example is probably one that's not a great example. So it's a bit of a cliche, and the irony is not lost to me around they've got 2 number 1 priorities, safety and quality. So that's probably an example of a cliche that probably doesn't sit very well. But an organisation that I actually saw last week, I went to a presentation from Bronte Campbell, ex-Olympian world record holder swimmer. Amazing. It was in the NAB building, and I couldn't stop but take a photo of this little sign that NAB had in their foyer. And they started with who they are. And who they were, or who they are, as their identity, is they describe themselves as being customer obsessed. The customer being the core of what they are all about. So, no doubt, and not having worked at NAB, but I can only assume at some point in time, a lot of what they talk about starts about their customer, and being obsessed around their customer is a great way to get started. And you can see here a really good example of an organisation that's got a really super clear identity and communicate that both internally and externally too. Another really good example is Toll. Toll refers to their identity as being safety obsessed. There's some similarities there, as you might appreciate, but the concept remains true around being really clear on who you are and what your identity is as an organisation. Some of the values that... Todd?
That's a great example, isn't it? At Toll, we believe everyone has the right to get home safe. Now, that's something with meaning.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, values are about what's important and what's right. And they've clearly articulated that in, I think, a really meaningful way. And Todd, I mean, you made reference to incident frequency rates not being the best indicator of performance. But you can see here that some inspirational, I guess, stats that Toll are communicating externally on their website around some of the outcomes that they've been able to achieve in the last few years, which no doubt is related to having a really clear identity and a strategy on how they're deploying that. So we'll step into the next area, which is, I find, also intriguing around where you want to play. As a business owner, I'm always having this conversation with my team around, actually, are we playing in the right areas? And just as importantly, where do we not want to play? Now, that's from a commercial perspective, albeit safety related. As it relates to a safety professional, this is around really segmenting the 101 things that you could possibly do and choosing where you want to play. Because often there's not an endless sea of resources, and to get the best return on your assets that you do have available, the resources you do have available, it is really important to be clear on where you want to play. So Todd, you spoke about whether is the experience before. How does that relate then to where you want to play in this context?
What it meant for us was that we had a choice by having the decision that whether would be the experience. Our choice then was we will make it safe regardless of the weather conditions, and we will make it safe beyond the weather thing, though, that we will make it safe no matter what the event is, whether it was a Chinese New Year event or Vivid starts tonight, I see in Sydney, whether it was something to do with Vivid operations. It actually just focuses you then on choosing to do only the things that give you that particular value outcome. So that was probably where it most led for us. For us, it's really interesting you put up the word priorities. Can I just reflect on that? Someone said to me a long time ago, it was a bit of an aha moment. Priorities is a plural. In the original Latin, there is no plural of the word priority. There can be only one priority. And I therefore resonated with Toll being very clear about that at the fundamental, they could not have a successful operation without focusing on that one priority. So coming to these safety objectives, when we did our planning every year, we would answer 3 questions and we would choose only 3 objectives against each of those questions. And when it came to safety, after the first 9 years, we made one objective, which was to go for AS 4801 and go for ISO 18001, which no attraction in Australia held at that time. I don't know if that's the case now, but that choice to have that system gave us a mechanic, a focus point for our entire culture. And by the way, it also did a hell of a lot to improve our safety system. So I just reflect on, there's some things coming from different angles there, Mark, and I've probably dragged in a few different things. The 3 questions we would ask on those objectives would be, what 3 objectives will satisfy our customers and make for a great experience this year? The next 2 are the most important ones, I think, from a safety perspective. What are the 3 internal processes or systems that will either make more efficient, develop, enhance, shorten cycle times, optimize this year? And the final question was, what are the capabilities that we need to develop to improve those systems and to meet those customer objectives as well? So is that employee skills? Is it training? Is it innovation? Is it IT and data? Is it some sort of human capability? So customer, internal process, capability, and each of them served up to each other.
Yeah, brilliant. So from what I'm hearing, Todd, use those 3 areas, almost starting with what needed to be true around when you were making those choices to make sure you achieve those 3 things, right?
And by the way, Mark, I just got to call you out there. I think one of the most powerful things in the Playing to Win framework is the question you just asked, which was fantastic. What has to be true? Everyone, have you been in meetings where you sit there and you're talking about your thing and then you come up with the people who go, but you can't, we've tried that before, it hasn't worked, all the negative and below the line statements that you receive? Mark's just pointed out one of the brilliant things in Playing to Win is that when you're having these conversations, the standard question is, well, what would have to be true? It's leaning in, it's going into problem solving mode. It's going, well, we'd have to do 1, 2, or 3, and then you can make a decision about whether that's the right way to go. But yeah, I just wanted to call that out, Mark.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thanks, Todd. And yeah, some really good examples there of what that would look like in practice. So in terms of the world of safety, there are an endless list of options. I was listening to someone the other day talk about the greatest and latest theory of safety, and someone called them out of talking around safety theatre. And I think there is a bit of safety theatre going on in the marketplace at the moment, where people get, I guess, stuck in the latest and greatest trend around what's sexy and shiny, and jumping on the latest theory of HOP or safety 2 or adaptive capacity or whatever the sexy term is. But regardless, I guess there are an endless sea of options, whether that's looking at, if you're an engineering or construction business where you're looking at assets as a core business, what's the life cycle of the asset? Are you going to focus on design, or are you going to focus on operational maintenance? If you're focused on contract and you've got a large contractor base, are you focusing on the sourcing and engagement end, or are you focusing on the mobilisation to get them moving on site? For Toll and other supply chain organisations who are moving raw materials or end-to-end, looking at the impact that transport has on the retail business. There is just an endless list of different segments you could focus your attention on. Often organisations will say to us, Mark, what's the best metric? Or Mark, what's your view on safety leadership? Should we focus on safety leadership first, or should we focus on foundational systems first? And it is situational. And I think if you've got a clear method of how you come up with this strategy, the endless sea of options almost become obvious. And those endless sea of options, that could also be overlaid with the demographics within your organisation in terms of the locations, the business units, the age, the gender, the shift work. So there are endless options. Some people just choose to make a blanket, all-encompassing scattergun approach and say we're just going to do X, Y, and Z across the whole organisation, versus segmenting and understanding exactly what they're going to choose to do, where they're going to do it, and where they're not going to do it. So again, having a proper strategic process to help make those choices to understand where to play can be super, super powerful, rather than getting lost in, an endless sea of options. So in terms of what that could look like, I made mention before of a performance assessment methodology that we have. Be it something similar to a performance assessment or maturity assessment, other tools that are often used in a business context is, a SWOT analysis or an effort versus impact assessment, second order thinking. There's a range of different assessment tools in the marketplace, but ultimately what they're designed to do is to take the complexity, help make some informed choices, so the strategy that you do come up with is simple, is clear, has a conscious trade-offs on what you're not going to do, and has some real targeted focus areas of where you're going to play. And ultimately that's around making those strategic choices and having an effective strategy. So Todd, from your perspective, I have no doubt of a CEO, safety is just one element of, albeit it sounds like it's a very important element of the bridge climb. What sort of assessment tools do your organisations use, if any, to be able to take the complex and turn that into like a really clear strategy?
Yeah, we built on the systems. Fortunately, with the theme park, we inherited a wonderful operating system from the American management company who established Wonderland. So we had an operating system, and this is the thing. What's your operating system? What are the mechanics of your business? And do you have a comprehensive system all the way from top to bottom for your operations? AS 48 and ISO 18000 certainly focused this in, Mark, on ensuring that we had systems that were, I don't like the term best practice, but were good, strong, robust systems to back up our intent. I know as a CEO, I bang on a bit at the higher level about this intent piece, but as I listen to you and you talking about the necessary complexity, that bottom right-hand circle with all the different types of spaces that you have to play in for safety was quite revealing. I still believe, I'm speaking as an ex-CEO, that making it relatable in a human, common language way matters. That's why I really responded to the toll piece about make sure everybody gets home safe. In our case, it was nothing shall fall. If you think about it, how do you sum up? You have to have these systems behind it, but how do you sum up so you get an all of culture effort, your entire safety system into a few words? Love what Toll did. Nothing shall fall for us. When you think about it, you think about that principle to everything we needed to do to make the business safe. Another way that we would talk about it, Mark, is, and we would talk about it this way to the government, everyone wears a seatbelt at bridge climb. Again, it was relatable, it was human, it was common sense. So absolutely the complexity of the systems, indebted to 4801 and 18000 for the process it put us through to make our systems robust. And I can see absolutely your structured way of going about this you have an operating system here for safety that people can benefit from if it's not robust enough in their business.
Yeah, brilliant, Todd. I love some of those really simple 3-word answers around what's really important and valuable for your organisation. Incredible. So we are going to do another poll now, Christina. And for those that are observant, yes, it is the same question. Our hypothesis was, and the hope was, that we'd actually teach you something today, and hopefully something everyone on the call could learn from. So, we want everyone to be really honest here. We want you to now answer the same question again. Does your organisation have an effective health and strategy? After reflecting on some of the words of wisdom from Todd around, what an effective strategy looks like. Really keen to hear from your answers and see if there's anything different, really.
At the moment, they do seem to be differing compared to what we had in the first instance. I'll take you back. The first poll that we asked at the beginning of the session lent with 57% of people saying that they mostly agree that their organisation has an effective health and safety strategy, whereas now it is so incredibly mixed. I'll wait for a few more people to answer, but the leading answer is mostly disagree. So it seems that you guys are helping to open their minds as to what is an effective health and safety strategy. I'll just wait for a few more people to answer. So if you haven't answered yet, if you could do so, that would be wonderful. Okay.
So, Christina, from what you're saying, there has been a little bit of a shift.
There has, yes. So the majority of people are now saying mostly disagree, whereas to start with, the majority were saying mostly agree. So the lead has shifted to mostly disagree from mostly agree.
Yeah, super interesting. And look, that was our hypothesis. And I think credit to you, Todd, in terms of being able to articulate what a strategy is versus a plan. But I also think, I think it's a symptom of the safety industry as a whole. And its strategy really is a bit of a forgotten topic to many respects. So I'm glad there has been some self-reflection, and hopefully we've been able to share something today for everyone on the call that they can actually use in a meaningful way too.
Mark, I think building what you've done on Play to Win, strategy is something everyone in the organisation does, guys. They talk about it as multiple cascades. When a team member goes out on the tools, they've got to make strategic choices every day about how they do that. So maybe that helps again, just land that it permeates everything. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Todd. So look, just quickly for those who are interested to learn a little bit more around safety strategy and some of the concepts that we spoke about today, we do have an accelerator class. There's a QR code there. Feel free to scan that, register your interest, and more than happy to share more information with you at a later stage.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. As this slide suggests here, this is the first of a 3-part webinar series in strategy for safety, presented by the fabulous team at FEFO. Todd, thank you so much. Your insights and your thoughts are just invaluable. I can't thank you enough. Next week, we are working with Mark on building to win and aligning your strategy, people and power. And followed by that, we are measuring what matters and how to track inputs, not just outputs. I will be emailing everybody that has registered a copy of the slides that you see in front of us. So if you didn't get a chance to screenshot or if you didn't get a chance to scan the QR codes, never fear, I will send them out to you all. Today's session has also been recorded, so we will pop that up on our YouTube channel, our website, on all our social media channels, and I'll also email you all a link to those. Just a reminder, with our YouTube channels and our websites, we are seeing incredible engagement after every webinar, especially these ones that we hold with FEFO Consulting. So remember to always head on over to our website or our YouTube channel to catch up on any previous webinars that you may be interested. There is a plethora of them on there, especially from the amazing team at FEFO. So we can't thank you guys enough. I think a few key things to just report back on, as Mark said, a really important thing to think about today is to have a think about whether you actually have a strategy or if you just have a plan, and try and focus on how to rectify that. And Todd, who mentions the most critical question being what would have to be true. So just ponder those things. Remember, you can come back at any stage and rewatch this. Again, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Todd, so much. If you have any final thoughts or words, please share them with us. Other than that, thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Christina. I appreciate the support from yourself and myosh. Yeah, incredible that you'll be able to carry on, which I think is just a really great method to be able to share learning with the industry every week. It's incredible. Well done.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Todd, as well.
A pleasure to serve you in this small way. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.